Are mega constellations the perfect recipe for a global disaster?
Earth is surrounded by a growing cloud of orbiting garbage.
3 billion kilograms of space junk.
So we're putting more and more satellites into orbits. More satellites means collisions, means more space junk.
How much of a concern is that?
Huge concern. This is a really big deal. It's hit the shuttle window, you know.
Really?
Yeah, we've seen that.
These collisions would lead to a cascade effect where each one creates even more pieces of space junk.
If that hit one of us.
This is just the beginning.
If it's ever activated,
It could trap us on Earth.
That could mean the end of space exploration while it's still in its infancy.
It's crazy.
Is this true? The last achievement in our quest for fast, reliable and ever-present internet connections has the potential to imprison us on Earth. But is there anything we can do about it? My name is Felix, welcome to What About It, let's dive right in. The rapid deployment of satellite mega constellations, such as SpaceX's Starlink, represents one of the most significant changes to Earth's orbital environment in human history. With close to 8,000 Starlink satellites already operational, this constellation has already surpassed the point at which it doubled the number of humanity's active satellites ever. Can you imagine that at the start of 2018 that number came to no more than just shy of 2,000 in total? Things are changing fast. Now imagine that number going up to 100,000 in 2030, an increase by a factor of 51 in 12 years. But they pose risks to space safety, astronomical research and Earth's atmospheric environment on an unprecedented scale. And the dangers that come with this development are already becoming apparent. Current collision probabilities suggest a 92% chance of debris collisions annually for the full Starlink constellation, while major telescopes face 30% of their twilight observations being compromised. Let's have a look at these constellations. What does it take for a group of satellites to be called a mega constellation? And why do they grow so fast, with more and more players in the space game creating their own constellations as if they were in a frenzy? Mega constellations fundamentally differ from traditional satellite deployments. While no official threshold exists, the industry generally considers constellations with more than 300 satellites to be mega constellations, although current deployments far exceed this baseline. Hundreds to tens of thousands of satellites working as integrated systems, typically providing global broadband internet or communication services. They work as one. Offering unmatched service quality, satellite constellations grow their user numbers exponentially. And with the number of customers on the rise, the number of satellites in constellations are growing faster than ever. As of 2025, more than half of all active satellites belong to mega constellations, representing a paradigm shift from the traditional model of single satellites or small constellation deployments that dominated space operations from the 1950s through the 2010s. The first mega constellation satellite launched in 2019, yet within 6 years, SpaceX's Starlink alone has grown to more than 7,800 satellites. More than all satellites launched in the first 50 years of spaceflight combined. And they are designed for 5-year operational lifespans requiring constant replacement. They turn to junk in 5 years. One company owns 65% of all of humanity's satellites. Looking at this distribution, it is clear to see the shift from space being a playground for government-run agencies to commercial players exploiting space at an exponential pace. But why is that? Starlink demonstrates the value of running such a massive cluster of satellites for a space company. Or should I say telecommunications provider. The constellation serves over 5 million subscribers across more than 130 countries, generating a projected 2025 revenue of $11.8 billion. That's a dramatic increase from $1.4 billion in 2022. Just in case you ever wondered how SpaceX can afford to pour billions into the development of their new Super Heavy launch vehicle, this is actually what's paying for the Starship program, not tax dollars, without ever running out of money. And there is one more thing about Starship. It will itself become the means to deliver more advanced Starlink satellites into orbit even faster than before. These newer Starship satellites weigh in at almost 800 kilograms. That is as much as a Fiat 500, compared to about 260 kilograms for the current generation going up with a Falcon 9 rocket. This new type of Starlink satellites can simply not be launched by the mighty Falcon 9 rocket. SpaceX's growing ambition needs a more powerful rocket to deliver, and it is all in plain sight. Their current satellites operate at altitudes ranging from 350 to 580 kilometers. Keep this in mind, it is a very important fact for later. Then there is Amazon's Project Kuiper. The company plans to operate a total of 3,236 satellites and faces FCC deadlines requiring full constellation completion by July 2029. Amazon has contracted over 80 launch missions across multiple providers, with manufacturing capacity reaching 5 satellites per day at peak production. These launch numbers easily dwarf efforts like building the International Space Station. But it's not just these two players. OneWeb's constellation focuses on serving aviation, maritime, government, and enterprise markets. These satellites operate in higher orbits than Kuiper and Starlink at an altitude of 1,200 kilometers. The European IRIS-2 constellation, with 264 satellites in low Earth orbit plus 18 in medium Earth orbit, will provide secure government communications and commercial broadband. AST Space Mobile from Texas, with 45 to 60 of their own satellites planned through 2025 and 2026. These remarkable satellites feature the largest commercial communications array in LEO at 222 square meters each. Looking outside the US and European markets, China's state-backed constellation programs represent the largest planned expansion beyond current Western satellite deployments, bringing the total number of Chinese constellation plans to approximately 38,000 satellites across all projects. India's SBS-3 represents 52 surveillance satellites to enhance its own intelligence capabilities. And who can blame them? Another North American constellation is Canada's Telesat Lightspeed, a 198 satellite constellation. Japan is also already actively working on its IQPS constellation, with 36 SAR satellites planned for the near future. But there is one problem. Even space is limited. Moving to the US, drinking water became an issue. We just could not stomach the chlorine, and as scientifically interested people, we were very aware of microplastic and PFAs in bottled water. And our home has a private well, challenging us with different problems. High iron, sulfur, and forever chemicals. These don't break down, they build up in your body, possibly harming brain development, immunity, and growth in children. They also are linked to fertility issues and hormone disruption in adults. We're using around 18 liters per day, 540 liters per month, costing us around $250 for 28 5-gallon jugs of water. Each month, that is $3,000 per year just for water. And after hours of research, I found the solution, CovePure. It's a 4-stage reverse osmosis system powered by clear wave technology, removing up to 99.9% harmful contaminants, including lead, arsenic, PFAs, even pharmaceutical residues. And it only costs us $50 every 3 to 6 months for a new set of filters. That saves us around $2,750 per year. And as a space enthusiast, I have to add that it uses partly the same filtration tech as on the ISS. It has become central in our lives and we use it for everything. Drinking, cooking, freshly brewed tea. The waiting time for the kettle is over. Just push the button and enjoy your tea or cocoa. Stop worrying about your tap water, trust what you drink. Go to covepure.com/whataboutit to get $200 off. That's covepure.com/whataboutit. For anyone who isn't completely blind, a nagging question arises. Is this dangerous? In short, yes. Let me introduce you to Donald J. Kessler. He was a NASA scientist, and in 1978 he predicted that satellite collisions would become a significant source of space debris by the year 2000. The most obvious danger of a mega constellation is a whole lot of space debris. The density of objects in low Earth orbit becomes high enough that collisions between objects could cause a chain reaction. Each collision generates debris, increasing the likelihood of further collisions. It's a cascading effect that has the potential of wiping out most satellites between 200 and 2,000 kilometers in altitude, including space stations. It's a bit like a Walmart parking lot during Black Friday sales. Our low Earth orbits would become unsafe for satellites and for crewed missions, effectively trapping us on Earth. And this debris remains in space for centuries. Space debris has reached a critical juncture where cascading collisions threaten to make Earth's orbit unusable for generations to come. This was also depicted in the blockbuster movie Gravity in 2013, where the International Space Station gets destroyed while George Clooney looks good. But why are these collisions so incredibly violent? Remember the Walmart parking lot? Those cars stand still. Imagine them being parked next to each other, moving at 7 to 15 kilometers per second. Even a fragment weighing only a few grams can catastrophically destroy a 1,000 kilogram spacecraft. Put simply, everything up there carries the energy of a rocket launch. And there is only one thing to clean up the mess: atmospheric drag. But atmospheric drag decreases exponentially the further we move away from Earth. At a height of 200 kilometers, objects deorbit within months. At 300, it takes them years. At 500, decades, and above 1,000, it takes them centuries. Most normal space debris is vaporized on re-entry, causing no harm. That is different during a Kessler cascade event. Fragment sizes vary, with millions of pieces too small to track but large enough to disable satellites. We can't even see them. Current estimates suggest that 500,000 to 700,000 debris objects between 1 and 10 centimeters in size are currently in low Earth orbit. Currently, the space environment has deteriorated dramatically, with larger trackable objects above 10 centimeters increasing from 30,000 in 2022 to over 35,000 by 2025. The 2024 Chinese Long March 6A explosion alone created over 700 new trackable fragments in a single event. And Russia's infamous 2021 anti-satellite test generated more than 1,500 pieces that continue to threaten the International Space Station. And expert assessments reach a troubling conclusion. The space debris environment has entered an unstable phase, with cascading effects already underway. Leading researcher John Crassidis warns bluntly that the Kessler syndrome is going to come true, while NASA estimates approximately a 10% annual probability of major collisions under current conditions. A 10% chance every year. Why isn't this in the news? With a massive increase in satellites already underway, the probability of crashes caused by decommissioned or malfunctioning satellites is growing exponentially. Here's another mind-boggling number. The Starlink constellation alone performed 50,000 collision avoidance maneuvers in just 6 months during 2024, averaging 275 maneuvers daily. It's rapidly turning into a road rage event, directly above our heads. Starlink reports involvement in over 1,600 close encounters weekly, representing 50% of all close approaches globally. This exponential growth in avoidance maneuvers, doubling every 6 months through 2023, demonstrates how congested space has become. And where there are laws in place in our parking lots at Walmart, orbit is like a Wild West scenario. The number of satellites has grown so rapidly that official efforts have been unable to keep pace. In short, if the debris cascade turns into a runaway effect, Earth would become a prison for us, and any service we get from space would stop. No more spaceflight, no more satellites. Imagine going back to maps. Imagine ships and planes getting lost at sea again. Weather predictions would become little more than guesswork once again. Is it going to rain tomorrow? No idea. Our internet and TV signals largely rely on satellites for fast and reliable service. Military intelligence is also largely based on satellite data. And there are many more systems that are only possible because of the massive fleet of satellites humanity operates in space. Welcome back to the age of not knowing. The irony is profound. Our success in using space threatens to deny it to future generations. We don't have time to wait a century for low Earth orbit to clean itself up again in slow motion. While technical solutions exist, from advanced tracking systems to robotic debris removal, deployment remains inadequate to the scale of the threat. And it will very likely stay that way. Remember? Each satellite carries the energy of a rocket launch within it. The Kessler syndrome represents humanity's first major challenge in managing a truly global threat beyond Earth's surface. While Kessler's 1978 theoretical framework has proven remarkably accurate, the timeline for action has accelerated dramatically. The issue scales symmetrically to the number of satellites in orbit. And there is more. The lockout has already begun in a different field. Even before the first group of satellites for the first Mega Constellation was launched, experts warned that astronomical observations could face unprecedented interference. While a few satellites don't disturb these observations much, things worsen with the number of satellites in orbit. Each satellite has the potential to photobomb pictures taken by telescopes observing the night sky. The revolutionary and brand new Vera C. Rubin Observatory will experience 30% of its twilight observations affected by satellite trails during 30-second exposures. Twilight observations are particularly affected as satellites glow like little flashlights in twilight conditions. And things get worse. Once 100,000 low Earth orbit satellites are operational, 10% of all images taken will have at least one satellite trail in them. Looking at the total number of planned satellites, it's only a matter of time until literally every image will be compromised. The issue is caused by the brightness levels of satellites. For these hypersensitive cameras, a faint satellite is like looking into a flashlight at night. This brightness will saturate the sensor, making it impossible to see the fainter objects in the same frame. The problem is well understood, and large providers, at least in the West, aren't unwilling to listen. SpaceX's DarkSat experiment, initiated to mitigate effects, achieved a 55% brightness reduction. There is just one problem: that's still very bright for major telescopes. Beyond the optical telescopes lies the field of radio astronomy, which also has its own set of problems despite the presence of protective zones. One of the observatories affected is ALMA, the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array. Scientists report literally becoming blind to certain times in the past as satellite transmission frequencies coincide with carbon monoxide observations in distant galaxies critical for understanding cosmic evolution. And even space telescopes like Hubble face satellite interference, with 2.7% of individual exposures crossed by satellites and projections suggesting a potential 10 times increase in interference by 2030. If we continue to increase numbers of satellites the way we are doing right now, tools like the James Webb Space Telescope, for example, located 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, could become the only way for unaffected observations in the future. So far, we've mainly talked about the problems caused by satellites in space. But we need to talk about the environmental impact caused by a modern space economy. Did you know that black carbon emissions from rocket launches could have an effect comparable to the entirety of subsonic aviation if the number of annual launches reaches 1,000? Solid rocket boosters release chlorine and alumina particles directly into the stratosphere, contributing to ozone depletion. Satellite re-entry creates unprecedented atmospheric contamination. The daily atmospheric re-entry of 2 tons of satellite material from just one constellation represents a fundamental change to upper atmospheric chemistry. Starlink satellites alone will deposit more aluminum into Earth's upper atmosphere than meteorites. Manufacturing environmental costs include toxic propellant, contamination at launch and crash sites, substantial CO2 emissions from satellite production, and resource extraction for electronic components. The problem is that there is no true international regulatory body to oversee satellite constellations. Space traffic management lacks international coordination. While ITU coordinates spectrum usage, no equivalent body manages orbital traffic. The US Federal Communications Commission uses a 1986 categorical exclusion to exempt mega constellations from environmental review, licensing over 30,000 satellites without any environmental impact studies whatsoever. The closest thing to a binding international agreement is the Outer Space Treaty from the year 1967. But is that how things should be done? The Government Accountability Office found that the FCC has never reviewed and documented whether categorical exclusion should apply to large constellations of satellites. Collision avoidance relies on voluntary guidelines with insufficient compliance mechanisms. That is so convenient, no one is watching. I recently made a fascinating video about all this. It is linked at the end of this one. The updated 5-year satellite disposal rules regulate after how many years a decommissioned satellite has to be deorbited. This recent reduction from 25 years to 5 years for disposal requirements addresses individual satellite lifespans but fails to account for constellation scale impacts. Mathematical models suggest that they'd need to safely deorbit 99% of all new satellites to maintain a clean orbit, far exceeding current compliance rates. That's the reality check. A global space governance is an essential requirement for our future as a spacefaring civilization. Yet, from today's point of view, it seems utopian. On top of all that, satellite constellations have the potential to significantly worsen international relations. Weaponization risks emerge from mega constellation technologies. The Ukraine conflict demonstrated commercial satellites providing critical military support, while high-resolution rapid revisit imaging capabilities raise surveillance concerns. On-orbit servicing capabilities for satellite repairs could be repurposed for interference or destruction. Large constellations create valuable military targets while increasing collision risks. Debris from destroyed constellations could be weaponized. Oh my god. The development of SpaceX's Starship military variant of Starlink exemplifies concerns about dual-use applications. Satellite mega constellations represent humanity's most ambitious space infrastructure project to date. Yet deployment proceeds faster than our understanding of long-term consequences. With just under 8,000 Starlink satellites operational and plans for over 100,000 additional satellites by 2030 combined, we face unprecedented risks to space sustainability, astronomical research, and Earth's atmospheric environment. The mathematical probability of collision is growing with each additional satellite launch. A runaway cascading effect would lead to orbital environments dominated by debris rather than functioning satellites. Astronomical impacts affecting 30% of major telescope observations threaten fundamental scientific research. Again, I'm not painting this black, these are the hard fact numbers. The window for coordinated international action narrows rapidly as orbital slots fill and collision probabilities approach mathematical certainty. Tragically, this window could be slammed shut when we cross the line toward the Kessler effect. Not only making human spaceflight impossible, but also risking the loss of satellite capabilities for generations, locking ourselves in, is a very realistic scenario. Yes, satellite constellations are dangerous. While they bring a new age of understanding, communication, and abilities we can't even dream of yet, the dangers are real and growing. And it's on us to find the right approach. That's it for today. Smash the like button, subscribe for more. This is what fuels the algorithm for free. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. Link is in the description and in the card you should see now. And if you want to learn more about who actually owns space, watch this video next to continue your journey. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode.